Thank you very much. So let me clarify for you what I really am. I'm a recovering venture capitalist. So what does that mean? It means I used to invest, but I don't anymore. Because for me, investing is a full-time activity. And since dropping out of the venture business, as was mentioned, I founded 2 venture-backed startups, and I found it more interesting to work with early-stage companies who often came to me looking for money when what they really needed was help. So today I have the best job in the world, or at least I think it's the best job in the world, because I get to meet interesting groups of entrepreneurs who come here from all over the world, travel all over the world. Last year I flew 130,000 miles and was in places from Brazil and Korea. I was there, Korea 4 times, and earlier this year I was in Egypt. So do a lot of traveling. You'll see another logo up there from Explorer International. Michelle Messina is my business partner, and together we work with entrepreneurs everywhere, and it's a great job. So today I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about something to put Silicon Valley in perspective for you. I understand you were at Stanford University the other day. You had some talks here yesterday, and hopefully I'm going to give you a better sense of how it all fits together. And then later, after I give my talk, I'm happy to answer questions that you have. If you want to know some things about raising capital here, happy to talk about that as well. Hopefully all of this will make some sense. So Silicon Valley is unlike any other place that you have ever been or will ever go to. And yes, if you go to New York City, they'll tell you they have Silicon Alley, and if you go up to it's either Portland, there's Silicon Forest, and if you go to one or more countries in the Middle East, they'll tell you there's Silicon Sands, and you know, there's only one Silicon Valley. And it has evolved and changed over time, but it's like no other place you will ever experience. So you are a group of, how many of you are part of the group of companies from Kazakhstan? Yeah? Big chunk of you. Yeah, okay. So welcome. I should have said that earlier. There are lots of groups of companies who come here. In a given week, sometimes I'll meet 2, 3, or 4 different. I don't get to see all of them. I get to see a lot of them. But the point is there are lots of different groups who come here. And one of the things that it's important for you to understand is that the standard here is very, very high. The caliber of companies, what customers expect is very, very high, because there is, in fact, tremendous competition here, not only from the companies that are based here, but from all of you people who come to Silicon Valley as well. And so when you hear people say, you need to really be focused, you need to be very crisp in what you say, you need to be very clear, that's for 2 reasons. One is the standard is very high, and Americans in general have very short attention spans. Okay? In most countries, when people ask questions, very often the questions are very long. And guess what? The answers are very long too, and there's an explanation before the answer. In the United States, the questions are short. The expectation is that the answers will be as short, if not shorter, and then there may or may not be an explanation afterwards. And I'm not saying we're right. I'm telling you that we approach and think about differently than people in other parts of the world. So startups need a lot of help. And don't underestimate the amount of time and attention and help that you will need as a startup. It is not easy. One of the unique things about Silicon Valley is there are a whole range of people and services, advisors, help for hire, consultants, part-time help who can help companies who are based here. That kind of support and infrastructure doesn't necessarily exist in every other part of the world, but it certainly is one of the features about Silicon Valley. So when companies get formed, they don't need to hire a chief financial officer or even necessarily a bookkeeper. There are outside services they can hire. You need to recruit people, you can hire somebody to do that. You need to do some early marketing or marketing communications, you can hire people to do that work. So that's one of the things that's unique. It's one of the things that I talk about as ways companies in Silicon Valley gain leverage. How do you move things along faster? How do you do it better? How do you do it in a way that takes less money? That's one of the things that companies here will do and do it successfully. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Silicon Valley because you've met some of the organizations and players in Silicon Valley. You've probably heard or read about other groups, other organizations in Silicon Valley. So first of all, at the center of it all is the startup. And more importantly, at the center of it all is the entrepreneur. If the entrepreneur didn't exist, it doesn't matter what's going on in Silicon Valley. It doesn't matter. Okay? We depend upon entrepreneurs who are smart, who are ambitious, who have great ideas, who want to make things happen. And that's the key important part that drives Silicon Valley. We have entrepreneurs who are local, we have entrepreneurs who come here and then build a business. We have entrepreneurs from other parts of the world who come here and expand their business. But if there aren't entrepreneurs, there's nothing. So we have R&D labs, NASA Ames, SRI International, which is an organization I spun a company out of. And there are a lot of smart people there. Some of those organizations will actually have a process of spinning companies out. SRI does, NASA less so, but people go to work at NASA, they come up with an idea, some of them will leave and start their own company. We have incubators and accelerators, and you've some of them, Y Combinator, there are a whole bunch of different organizations who select companies, they work with them, they help them. There are pros and cons to those kinds of organizations, and if you have questions about those pros and cons, I'm happy to take them in questions later. They're angel and seed investors, and while we have a lot of angel and seed investors, they really don't play a huge role in building businesses. When I was investing, we occasionally saw angel and seed investors, but the Valley was not dependent upon them. For a lot of companies today who want to start building product, who don't have customer traction, angel and seed investors turn out to be very important. So as Silicon Valley has changed over time, the importance of angel and seed investors has grown in Silicon Valley. They are an important part today, but they don't really drive Silicon Valley. The people who really drive Silicon Valley are the venture investors. They are typically the ones who really help companies grow and be successful. And venture capital, my old firm was started in 1962. It was one of the earliest firms on Sand Hill Road. Anybody visit Sand Hill Road yet? Hopefully you will. It's nothing more than a road. It just happens to be a road where there are a lot of venture capital firms located. There are large public corporations who often are purchased of startup companies, will sometimes work with those startup companies, and again, they're an important part of the process, but they don't drive the process. And then you have, as I mentioned earlier, service providers who really help companies grow. In Silicon Valley, one of the key service I encourage every company to get is a really qualified attorney, a qualified lawyer. They are your best friend. They should be your best friend. You want them to be your best friend. Why is that? Because they're a really important point of connection between you, investors, other service providers, finding key hires that you can make and should be making. And while they can't perform miracles, they do not walk on water. Trust me, I've seen them. They go on water, they go right to the bottom. But in fact, they are valuable, and they are used to working with early stage startup companies. There are a number of lawyers who specialize in working with international companies who want to build the base of business here, in some cases keep their development effort in their home country. So I encourage you to understand the service providers. If there are people you want to get connected to, I'm happy to make introductions. So let's talk about government agencies. So we have lots of foreign government agencies located here in Silicon Valley. So Denmark has a group here, Brazil has a group up in San Francisco, and a number of these organizations have pavilions and facilities at a number of the incubators and accelerators. Where's the state of California? Where's the U.S. federal government? They're not here. We don't want them here. Right? They do not set policy. They do not tell us what to invest in, what things to emphasize. So unlike a lot of other parts of the world where the government has a very big say in what happens, what gets funded, what the direction is, I've done a lot of work in Korea and was actually part of a discussion talking about policy that Korea should be implementing to improve its startup environment. We do not see the U.S. government, we do not see the state of California here in Silicon Valley. We don't want them here. Where the government plays an important role is in what we call rule of law. So we have laws, they're obeyed. We have courts if people do things that aren't. We have laws around intellectual property. That's where the government is useful. The government is useful because here in the U.S., I can get a company formed in 3 hours. I can make a company go away. It probably takes a week or two, but there are established rules and laws, and in a lot of other places, it takes weeks or months to get a company incorporated and started. And in some places, if a company fails, the person who founded the company, the investors, have tremendous liability. And we have a corporate structure here that There are certain requirements on what gets paid or not, but it protects the individual from personal bankruptcy. So that's where the U.S. government can play a role. I've already talked about venture investors as being an important part of the process, and now I'm going to talk about these. So if you go to Stanford, visit Berkeley, they will tell you that they are the source of all great things in Silicon Valley. Let me share with you my perspective. One of the great things about the universities is that every year they bring in thousands of really bright people from all around the world as undergraduates, as graduates, as teaching assistants, as professors, as whatever. And those people come here, they like what they see, and they don't leave. Somebody can get me a bottle of water. And that's a really great part of what makes Silicon Valley work. Yes, there have been innovations that come out of the universities, and I want to underplay that, but the source of that innovation really, in most parts, are the students themselves, the graduate students themselves. Stanford has an accelerator program. It's called StartX. What's interesting is it's not run by the university. It's not run by the faculty. It's run by the students. And when they look for mentors for the companies, they look outside of the university. So I mentor StartX companies. I met the VP of engineering at Box, who was working with me on one particular company. So they bring in really, really bright people. Well, I'm an exception. They took me as a charity case. But in general, very, very bright people, a lot of whom have ties to Stanford University, who are extremely well connected, and StartX is a great model for innovation in Silicon Valley. So hopefully that gives you a perspective on all the things that you've seen so far and all of the things that you will see over the next week or so. So being an entrepreneur is not easy. Being a superhero is being a risk taker. And you have to be willing and able to take that risk. And, you know, I'm hoping he has a safety net somewhere down below. He at least has a rope, you know, because if he was trying to do it without a rope, that would be called suicide, right? That would be called being stupid. He at least has a rope. And so be willing to take risks, but don't do stupid things. Don't do things that are so risky that you say, this is completely crazy. One of the things that happens here in Silicon Valley is people talk about their ideas. And in a lot of other parts of the world, people will not say anything to anybody about their idea. We do that because it's a way of making our ideas get better. It's a way of connecting with other people and bringing in other co-founders and other people who can help. For the generation that you are, everybody knows about TMI, too much information. So when we socialize our ideas, we don't tell people everything, but we talk about it generally. We ask for help, we get help. It's an environment where people are willing to listen and provide advice, and that's good. That's good for your ideas. And we've had people from a number of parts of the world where People are uncomfortable sharing their ideas. We've had places where when I've asked the CEO after he or she makes a presentation, so tell me about your financial status. How much cash do you have? What's your burn rate? When are you out of money? I'm sorry, I'm not going to tell you that. Okay, that's not how you build trust, particularly with an investor. It's also, it runs counter to how we do things here. And it works here. It may not necessarily work in other parts of the world. So one of the challenges that people have as an entrepreneur is they get advice from lots of different people. They'll get advice from their parents, which says, you know, why are you doing this crazy thing? Why don't you get a real job? Go work for the National Bank of, right? You know, go work for, get a real job, right? Why are you doing those sort of things? And that happens all the time. You will get lots of conflicting advice. So you have to listen to what everybody says, but you have to make your own decisions. And that's really important. And sometimes that's going to be really hard. Your head is just going to get filled with too much information, conflicting information. I can tell you, though, that how many of you have technical or engineering backgrounds? Okay, so I have an engineering background. One of the problems is with engineering is when we are engineers, we seem to think there's always the right answer, right? And it's either A or it's B. It's not always that clear. I had a CEO of a company in Brazil, and he was unable to make any kind of decision because he was waiting until all the information he needed so he could make the perfect decision. You will never have all of the information you need to make that perfect decision, okay? You have to do a lot of listening, you have to do a lot of thinking, and you have to make decisions. And that may ultimately be the hardest part of your job as an entrepreneur. So I talked earlier about the need to socialize your ideas. And of course, the question people always ask me is, well, if I socialize my idea, somebody's going to steal it. Okay, ideas are cheap. If all you have is an idea, if you do not have the team who can execute on that idea, if you don't have the organization, if you don't have the contacts to be able to sell product, whatever it is, to your customers, then you really don't have a viable business. So it's great to have ideas. I've had lots of ideas over the years, but I've also realized that in many cases, I am not able to execute on that idea. And so think about not only the idea, but also, you know, are you capable of executing on your idea? So as an entrepreneur, you need supporters. You need people around you who are going to encourage you because it's not easy. But you also need people around you who are going to raise the tough questions. I'm one of those people. You know, my partner says, you know, I'm really tough. And I'd rather think of myself as being very direct, because I don't tell you you're right or you're wrong, but I often raise questions about, so tell me why you're doing this. Do you have the data to prove that this is going to work? And so while I will encourage you to get lots of supporters, I would also encourage you to get people who you trust, who are going to be around you, who are going to challenge you with those tough questions and force you to get answers to those questions. Because out of that, you will have a better and more successful business. There are something like 160 or 170 languages spoken in Silicon Valley. data from several years ago was that approximately half of the startups in Silicon Valley were started by foreign-born entrepreneurs. Diversity takes many shapes and forms, male, female, different experiences, different countries, different races, religions. More importantly, it takes people who look at things differently, who can give you a perspective that will help you be successful. And so think about the teams that you bring forward. Make sure you have the right team. If you're going after 15-year-olds as your market, you may not have a 15-year-old in your company, but maybe you want a bunch of 15-year-olds as advisors to your company, customer advisory board. If you are a team, and we see this all the time, of men and your target market is women, that can be a problem. So think about how you address that. But more importantly, make sure you have a mix of skills and talents and backgrounds on your team. Women control a lot of the spending in the United States, something like 85%. When I talk to international audiences and say, how much do women control in terms of the spending? The number doesn't seem to change around the world. So understand that in a lot of cases, both as consumers as well as women in corporations, you have, it is not a white male dominated world anymore. Understand who you're selling to and make sure you have been thoughtful about that in terms of not only who's on your team, but how you approach your target market and what you say. And don't put your foot in your mouth. That doesn't work. Okay, so it would be nice to say that when you're involved in a startup, it's all really clear as to where you're going, what's going to work, and what's not. Give up on that. You are in a road that has curves on it, that has fog that appears at the worst possible time. You're going to have to apply the brake. You're going to have to do a lot of steering, and you're going to have to pray that there isn't something in the middle of the road on time. Welcome to the world of the startup. One of the biggest challenges that companies have is moving quickly, particularly companies that come here to Silicon Valley. It's imperative. Why? Because time is money. It's imperative because everybody here in Silicon Valley is moving really, really fast. That's one of the reasons I talk about leverage, working with service providers, finding out how you can offload things that are not mission critical. Now, I've had startups say to me, oh, okay, well, we're a US-based company and we're going to have product development done somewhere else, 3,000 to 10,000 miles away. That's probably not a good place to get leverage initially. Okay? Maybe on your second or third product iteration, that can work. But in terms of marketing, in terms of product brochures, in terms of hiring, in terms of finance, those are often non-mission critical areas where it makes sense. You know, testing sometimes is best done by an outside group, documentation. One of the things that companies often come here and say to me is, I really don't want to build an organization here. I really don't want to spend time here. I want to go back to Melbourne, Australia. I want to go back to Denmark. I want to go back to Rio de Janeiro. Actually, I want to go to Rio de Janeiro as well. And all I want to do is sign somebody who's going to take care of sales. Right? I'll give them the product, and they'll figure out the market, and they'll sell the product, and it'll all be fine. Don't do that. It will not work. I will guarantee you it. Figuring out who the customer is, getting that interaction with the customer, getting feedback from the customer, understanding what's important to the customer, and what iterations of your product are necessary, you need to be here doing the initial sales. You need to figure out who the right customer is. You cannot offload that to somebody else. It doesn't work. It'd be wonderful if it does. It doesn't work. And it's not going to work for your first year. It's not going to work for your second year. By your third year, maybe. It's okay to find points of leverage, but make sure you find the right points of leverage. Make sure you don't try and do things that will ultimately slow you down and ultimately not make you successful. We are transparent here in Silicon Valley. We're open about it's a cultural thing here. It is not a cultural thing in lots of other parts of the world. So when I ask the CEO of a company, so when are you out of money? In Silicon Valley, the CEO will tell me. In other parts of the world, won't get an answer. We depend upon transparency. An investor requires transparency. So if you tell an investor one thing, and then after the investment closes, oh, well, I told you that, but I really didn't mean that. You are in a heap load of trouble. You are in a huge amount of trouble. Do not do that. It will not work. Now, again, TMI, too much information. Do you tell everybody everything? No. But employees expect, you don't say to an employee, well, we may not raise another round of financing, so, you need to go out tomorrow and get a job. I'm not sure that that's a good thing to do, while you still have 6 months of cash left. But employees expect you to say, we're raising capital. It's going to take us some time. We're all part of this. You just need to be aware that until we raise additional capital, we're going to be very careful how we spend our money. Okay? One is a message of, abandon ship. We're in trouble. Everybody, every man, every woman for themselves. The other message is, we're a team. Here's where things stand. The latter is what is expected here in Silicon Valley. And we think it's a great model for all parts of the world, but it's certainly the model here. So if you come here to do business, you hire U.S. Residents as employees, that's the level of openness and transparency they're going to expect. As I said earlier, if you're talking to others, that's the kind of level of openness and transparency they're going to be expecting as well. So I'm told that it's hard to boil the ocean, that if I want to raise the temperature of the ocean 1 degree, it's going to take a lot of energy. And yet, that's metaphorically what I see so many startup companies trying to do. They're trying to do everything. They're trying to educate the market. Everybody needs to know about what we're doing. We're coming to the U.S. market, so we're going to tell everybody. We have 25 or 30 major metropolitan markets in the United States spread out over 3,000 miles. It's a lot of territory. You can't do it all. It doesn't work. And yet we see too many companies, particularly from around the world, trying to do that. We have companies here who try to do it as well. So again, the need to be really careful and focused because you never have enough time, enough energy or money to be able to do it. Figuring out a business is sort of like a Rubik's Cube, right? So you got to get all the colors right on all, what is that, 8 sides? Yeah, 6 sides? 8 sides. The pieces have to fit. The problem and the solution you provide need to fit the customers. The business model needs to make sense. The target market, how you approach it, how you build your business needs to make sense. And all too often we see companies where it's sort of, we're doing this and we're doing that and we're doing that. It doesn't make sense. So it all has to fit together in a way that makes good business sense, in a way that builds value, because your job as entrepreneurs and CEOs is to build value, and put it in a way that ultimately you create a successful business. Because if I'm a venture capital investor, what I want is a business that's going to be successful. I'm not interested in the technology, not interested in the product. Oh, I am a little bit. But I am interested in building a successful business. So, as I said earlier, don't boil the ocean. Get very, very, very focused on the business. People often, and they're often waving their hands when they do this, right? I'm going to talk about the market. They're sort of like trying to fly. You got to be focused. Who is your customer? Where are they located? How big are they? How small are they? Who's the user? Who's the decision maker? Who has the budget? And really get very, very granular, very, very specific as to exactly who your first customer is. It matters. In a lot of other markets, we see people targeting whoever they can get because the markets tend to be small. The advantage of the United States is the market opportunities tend to be very large, but it means you also need to be very, very focused. And that's one of the big things we seek with companies, both here and from abroad. So you've got to be focused. My question often for startups is, tell me about customer one. And of course, people struggle through it. And after 5 minutes, they're sweating, hands are, and they think they've answered my question. I nod my head and I say, okay, now tell me about customer number 2. And they've lost it, okay? But those are the kinds of questions you may have answered in your home market, but in the U.S., if you're entering the U.S. market, you need to ask those questions anew, because the U.S. market is often different in terms of customers and customer profiles, in how they talk about the problem, in terms of the channels of distribution. So it's not that it's necessarily better or worse, it's just maybe different. But focus will help you. And people then say to me, but if I focus, then I'm losing out on a bigger market. You're not. If you focus, you get your initial customer traction, which is the hardest part of your job. Do a few things well. It's as simple as that. You can't possibly do everything, so figure out the things you can do well and make sure you focus on them, and then figure out how you can get others to do those non-critical parts of your business. So we've seen too many companies who build a product, go to market, and discover they've built the wrong product. And for any of you who've read The Lean Startup, what I'm going to talk about is not a surprise. Build your minimally viable product. Build as little as you can and get market feedback quickly. Sometimes your minimally viable product is a PowerPoint presentation. It's not even the product. Okay. Sometimes for credibility, for other reasons, you have to build the product, and you should build the product. But you need that validation, you need that feedback, and again, if you're selling elsewhere in the world and you're looking at the U.S. market, to think of the U.S. as perhaps a different market in terms of needs, requirements, and priorities, in terms of product features. The question we ask here in Silicon Valley, and it's an important question, is can you make the company into a big business? Very often we have people say, gee, we're going to go after small and medium businesses. We've looked at the data, and there are lots and lots of small and medium businesses here in the United States. That's true. But how do you get to those small and medium businesses? Right? If you call on each store one by one by one, how long is it going to take until you have a big business? It's going to take a long time. So think about those kinds of issues. Think about them hard. We had a company, any of you with IBM runs a Smart Camp competition. They do it globally. They identify startups in a range of different countries, and they hold competitions. And I've had the privilege of being a mentor to a number of the competitions here in the U.S., and they ran a global competition in Dublin several years ago. And I met a very interesting company, and they were after doctor offices. They had a better solution for doctor offices, and they were going to the small doctor offices, 1 and 2 and 3 doctors. And my question for them was, so how are you going to scale? How are you going to be a big business? And they said, oh, we're going to be a big business because, we can sell them really quickly. We go into a doctor's office, we talk with them, and in a couple hours we closed a sale. And I said, I'm not convinced that that's going to work. So here's the good news. They were a winner of the IBM competition. They're growing, they're successful. But guess what? Who is the customer today? 500, 1,000 doctor medical practices, clinics, and hospitals. So they learned, they got some traction slowly, but they realized that if they were going to become a big business, that they really needed to focus on the kinds of customers and targets they could scale. So think about that. You may want to go to some easy customers first for market validation, to get references, to learn more about your product and product features. But if that's not a scalable market, you need to be thinking about, so what is the market opportunity that ultimately make me grow and scale the business? So there are a lot of people who start businesses. There are a lot of people who start businesses that I describe as lifestyle businesses. Oh, we can grow this to be $1 million or $2 million a year. And by the way, I'm going to pass this business down to my children. And if you want to do that, great. Go ahead and do it. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But here in Silicon Valley, we're not focused on the little slice of pie. We're focused on the big slice. We're focused there. That's what investors want. They want to see companies that are going to grow and scale and become big businesses. And they're either going to go public, they're going to have a stock offering, or they're going to be acquired. So if you have a son or daughter you want to leave a legacy to, just leave them a lot of stock or a lot of cash. They'll love you either way, okay? Trust me, trust me. But that's what people are looking for here. They're looking for big opportunities. The opportunity for a company to ultimately grow and scale and get very large. And so you need to be thinking about the business, the markets, the opportunities that you're going to focus on that are going to create that large business. We talk about being global from day one, and let me tell you what that doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that from day one you go and decide you're going to, start selling to customers in Australia and Brazil and the United States and, Russia and Kazakhstan and wherever. That will not work. That's called boiling the ocean. But what it does mean is if you think of you have the potential to be an international business, as you build your website, what language do you start in? Have you built your website so it's easy to ultimately have it a button that gives a choice of other languages? Have you thought about what the market opportunities are internationally and which country or countries you would want to go to next as a business? And so companies who are global from day one means they've thought about those kinds of issues and concerns. I will also tell you, I see lots of companies, we meet lots of companies who, we meet with them and they say, yeah, I've decided I want to enter the United States and, I've done no work in the US market and I'm going to be, opening an office in a month. And I say, good luck. Okay? It takes 6 months or a year's worth of work to understand the US market, understand the requirements, think about what it is you build in your product, think about how you're going to organize and address the US market. So it takes real work. My partner and I did some work for a company in Colombia. He's doing extraordinarily well. A lot of business in Colombia. They have customers in Peru. They have customers in Ecuador. And we said to them, we think you can be a global company. Because they were focusing just on the LATAM market, just Latin America. And the CEO said, well, okay, we'll just open a little office in Miami. Miami seems to be a very comfortable place for Latin American companies to open offices. We said, no. What you need to do is you need to be in, and it's you, the CEO, you need to go and talk to customers. You need to validate there's a U.S. market. We'll introduce you to a lawyer who will help you set up a U.S. corporation. You need to understand how you've got to do it, and you've got a whole bunch of milestones that you're going to need to achieve in a short period of time. And the CEO said, okay. I said, well, you got to have a plan. A day later, he had taken somebody who had recently hired, who was very good, previously been a very senior guy at Microsoft. That guy was going to run the Latin American operations, and the CEO made plans to visit the U.S. Okay? That's what we call decisiveness. Now, is it going to work? Don't know. But he's going to find out if it's going to work, and he's doing the right things. He's on a path. Well, if there's a U.S. market, if there's an opportunity, he's organized in a way that ultimately he can succeed. So, you guys going to be visiting Google at any time? Okay. So, These are the old bicycles at Google. You'll see they painted them a different color. I think they're blue now or something. Repeating patterns. You always need to be looking for repeating patterns. Now, what I often say to people is, let me go over here. That's a dot. That's a line. Okay? So, one of the things you need to be looking for is patterns of behavior, information that will sway you in one direction or another, and one point probably isn't enough, and 2 isn't enough, and 3 may not be enough. But also realize that after about 6 or 8 or 10, you don't need 100. Okay? And your job is to look for patterns, consistent patterns in terms of problem, issues, concerns that potential customers who you're targeting raise, about how you address them as you build your business. And by the way, investors always look for patterns too. And just be aware of that. Investors look for patterns so that when a company does things, or it's in a market space where the investor had a great, they are more likely to invest. If it's in its market segment or has characteristics that look like a business that an investor invested in, they're probably going to be very reluctant to invest in that market segment, because investors ultimately, they analyze with their brain and they invest with their gut. Okay, so understand that. So it doesn't always go as planned. It never does. It never will. And your job is to stay calm, and to stay calm, and to stay calm, right? Because if you're not calm, the team of people you are leading will not be calm, and you will not be successful. And as I said earlier, you're going to have to make those tough decisions. And you absolutely will not have perfect information. You will be making decisions when you absolutely do not want to be in a position of making decisions. And yet you have to do that. So have a trusted group of advisors, listen to them, get different perspectives, and then you need to make the decision. And those will not be easy decisions, and in some cases they will be what I call make-break decisions. It's a very uncomfortable position to be in, but that's what it takes as an entrepreneur. So if you fail quickly, you have more opportunities to succeed sooner. So if what you think is the right product doesn't work, don't agonize over it. It doesn't work. It doesn't meet the customer's needs. Figure out what does and build that product. There are a lot of companies in Silicon Valley who you hear about who are tremendous successes. Any of you know about Yelp? It's a website. It started off for restaurants, now does reviews of doctors and reviews of lots of different kinds of things, and people go on and they give them stars and they write reviews. Yelp, that's not how Yelp started. It started as a dating rating service for people who wanted to go on dates so they could rate other people. Okay? It didn't work. It was a dumb idea. It was a dumb idea then, it's a dumb idea now, but the management team had the good sense to say, you know what, maybe we can take and apply the same basic technology to a different market. The company went public, it's doing very well. That's what really happens here. So all the stories you read about, everything went perfectly, not the case. It takes perseverance. It's really hard work. If it were easy, everybody would do it. There are tens of thousands of startups which get formed every year here in Silicon Valley. Do you know how many of them received Series A financing from venture investors last year? 343. Very small number. A number of those companies received angel financing, so that's not in the database. But it's not easy. It takes a lot of work. So this, who isn't involved with Twitter, but was one of the early founders of Twitter, said, timing, perseverance, and 10 years of trying will make you look like an overnight success. Google is 20 years old, eBay is 30 years old, Facebook is 15, Twitter, I think, is something like 10 years old. Yet we think of them as recent startups, recent successes. These companies have been at it a very long time. It takes time, it takes perseverance. And as I said earlier, often people think that I start here and I wind up there. You may start here and wind up there, but you know what? That's what it really looks like. It looks like that for the companies who are successful, and it almost looks like that for the companies who are unsuccessful. But at one of those hairpin turns, they fail. We have lots and lots of companies in Silicon Valley who fail. Something like 6, 8 out of 10 companies in Silicon Valley fail. Right? Failure is part of success. And if you look at some of the most successful entrepreneurs, they have failed 1, 2, 3 times before their company was successful. After that company that was successful, entrepreneurs have failed in subsequent ventures. There is no guarantee of success here in Silicon Valley or in any other part of the world. So there's skill, and there's serendipity, and there's luck. Being at the right place at the right time can make a huge difference. There have been lots and lots of companies formed, and sometimes Don Valentine from Sequoia Capital often would say, and Sequoia invested in Apple and Cisco and a number of very successful companies, he would say, too early, too early, too early, too early, just right, too late. So the timing matters. And sometimes when you're late, you can be successful. Google was not the first search engine built. It was about the last one. Okay? And they built a better product. Not quite as much a better product as they think, but it's a better product. But more importantly, they had a better business. They figured out a better way to make money, and they made a lot of money. When they were started, when they were growing, and even today, they make a tremendous amount of money. And so they found a way to be successful even though they were late. But understand that you rarely can control some of those kinds of issues. So if you're lucky, you have people who are your co-founders who are lucky, keep them near you. I want to balance what I say here. it is important to be really a great presenter. Being able to quickly and easily grab people's attention, convey your idea, and be effective is a wonderful skill. There are very few people who are great at it. Steve Jobs was great at it. Most of us can learn to be okay as presenters. But I can tell you, there's this thing in the last couple of years here in Silicon Valley about pitching competitions. And people think it's all about the pitch. It's not. It's about building a business and making sure that it's not simply what you think is a great pitch, but making sure that there's real substance behind that presentation. And so, I have people who say to me, oh, I've won 6 pitching competitions over the last year. Great. Now, what have you done in terms of building your business? That's what I really care about. And that's where companies fail, because they think it's all about pitching. It's not. Being an awesome presenter, yes, it's valuable if you're presenting to an investor. It's more valuable if you're presenting to a customer, a partner. You're trying to hire people. Being effective in communications is really, really important. And I will tell you from my own experience, I'm not a great presenter, but I've gotten better over time. And it takes practice, and practice, and practice, and practice. Think about presenting. If you have children, if you have younger brothers and sisters, if you have friends, you've got to practice. And it means you have to stand up, and you got to get in front of them, and you can't be nervous, and you can't be doing all this, right? I have people who dance all the time, because they're nervous, or their hands are moving all the time because they're nervous. And this can be really distracting. So thinking about what you do, what you say, and being effective takes practice. So encourage you to learn and get better. You will all get better with practice. And one of the things you're learning to do is communicate the value. It's not the features and functions of your product. It's the value you're delivering to the customer. That's what a customer cares about. If you're asking for a customer to give you money, then they have to be able to save money or make money using your product. Yes, it has all the bells and whistles, it does all sorts of things, but they're concerned about their business. What's in it for them? I often have companies say to me, well, I want to meet IBM, PwC, all these large corporations because they can help me be successful. Okay, why should they want to meet you? What's in it for them? What value are you giving them? What can they get out of working with you? So understanding your value, sometimes it's called value proposition, but understanding that core value is critical regardless of who you're talking to. And putting it in a language, putting it in words that whoever you're talking to can understand is equally important, because it's all about customer value. It's about providing that value ultimately to your customer. Because if your customer doesn't get value, frankly, you don't have much of a business. So what goes up must come down. You can be doing great one day and something will happen. It always does. We have companies who are riding high, and then a report comes out about something, and suddenly the company is losing users as they have a problem selling their product. You're going to have those twists and turns. Every company does. So the quality of management is what investors look for. The quality of management is something that you should be looking for. Do you have a team of people when it all hits the fan who are going to help you figure out how to make it right? You know, we all are afraid of things. This is from an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Can't remember which movie. But, you know, being a little afraid is good. I like entrepreneurs who are a little scared, who are always looking over their shoulder. Why? Because having that edge makes you more willing to look at the things you need to do differently, the things you do, how you need to move faster, what other markets you need to be addressing, because maybe people you're competing against is really aggressively pursuing your market, and they're bigger and they have a lot more money and they may have a better product. So thinking about those things is important. But don't become like the deer who gets paralyzed, right? You know, when things come up, and they will, do not get paralyzed. Understand that, you know, you need to just do something. You need to think about, okay, so we're here now. This happened. What do we do? It's going to happen, right? I guarantee you it will happen one or more times in the growth and success or growth and failure of your company. We talked earlier about socializing your ideas, you know, getting feedback from people. We have a culture here of paying it forward, so people are willing to help other people because they know that hopefully you in turn will help others. So that means, you know, people will give you advice, they'll give you suggestions, they'll give you introductions. That's what that means. What it doesn't mean is people aren't going to work for free. You know, I've had people come to me and say, oh, you know, you talk about pay it forward, so, you know, I want you to do all this work for me, and I don't want to pay you. They don't put it quite in those words, but that's really what they're saying. And I say, thank you very much, but, you know, when I work and provide value, I expect to be compensated. It's simply like that. So, you know, help and advice and, you know, introductions should be free. And I have people who say to me, oh, well, you want to be introduced to this person, you know, what are you going to pay me? Introductions are free. You should not, in the United States, be paying for introductions. Now, if somebody really needs to help you work on your presentation, help you think about, so what's your value, make sure that you have a cohesive, coherent story before there's an introduction, that part is work. Okay? But my making an email introduction is not work. And you should not have to pay for that. And do not pay for it. So, somebody recently said, somebody here in Silicon Valley said, I'm really getting tired of a bunch of 20-year-olds building products for people just like themselves. And we have a lot of those businesses here in Silicon Valley. And 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000 succeeds. And for all the ones who don't succeed, I hope they take that experience of being in a startup and they start working on what I'll describe as real problems. We have real issues on our environment, water, on, you know, access to, you know, clean air. And I always encourage people, it's great to follow your passion. It's even better to follow your passion, which is something that's going to help the world. So think about that. If it's not in your first venture or your second, maybe it'll be in your third startup. Because bright people are the ones who can help make the world a better place. And most of all, through this whole process, enjoy the journey. It's exhausting, it's exhilarating, you will have emotional highs, you will have lows, you will be happier than you've ever been in your life, you will at times be sadder and more frustrated than you have ever been in your life. But it is a journey unlike anything else you'll ever be on, and out of it, you will be a different person. So I encourage you to enjoy that. It's something that I've been on several times, and I've participated as a backseat driver in many other businesses. So with that, I will thank you for your attention and be happy to take any questions you may have. Questions? I'll take answers too if people.
I got a question. You mentioned that we are free to communicate our ideas within the Silicon Valley, but what about IP protection actually? Is it safe to communicate them?
Okay, so this goes back to the issue of TMI, too much information. So if you have a patent that has yet to be filed, if there is some secret sauce in what you are doing, I'm going to tell somebody on the first meeting what it is. And in most cases, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can say, we have a broad patent. It covers a number of key areas to protect, our algorithm analyzing, people's behavior. You don't have to go into all the details. So, socializing ideas, communicating, being open, transparent, not taking off all your clothes and walking around naked. At least, I wouldn't encourage you to do that. And so be thoughtful about what you present and who. One of the questions that people often ask me is they say, well, I want anybody I meet to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Let me be very clear with you that investors and most of the people you meet will not sign an NDA. They will simply say to you one of two things. I won't meet with you, or if I do meet with you, don't tell me anything that you consider to be top secret. It's as simple as that. So, having been in I've been involved with businesses for 35 years now, and been through many, many cycles of Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley has changed a lot. 30 years ago, when I wanted to become a venture capitalist, Brooke Byers from Kleiner, Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers, I met with him. I came out to Silicon Valley, and I said, Brooke, I'm a venture capitalist. What do I need to do? He said, go work for a disk drive company. Maxtor, Seagate, there were at that time probably 15 disk drive companies. I didn't do that. And today, that would be the last advice I would ever give somebody, because hardware, disk drives is not where things are happening in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has undergone changes over time, and will continue to change and evolve over time. More questions? Yes. If you stand up, because it's easier to.
In your opinion, actually not in your opinion, but
I have no opinions.
what would you personally want to be the next big thing?
What,
What would you personally want to be the next big thing? Business operating in what area are you looking for to become the next big thing?
If I knew that answer specifically, number one, I wouldn't tell you, and number two, I'd be forgetting going out, meeting you guys, and be doing nothing but investing in those areas. Obviously there are a number of trends, and we've all heard and read about the Internet of Things, data analytics. One of the things I can tell you from having been around for too many years is that when new markets emerge, people paint them with what I call a really wide paintbrush. Okay? This is the market. And yet the companies who are ultimately successful identify this really narrow slice. So they use a fine paintbrush because in fact that narrow slice turns out to be a huge market. And so what I would encourage people to do is, as they see some emerging tech trends, and there's a long list, Internet of Things and data analytics and a number of other areas, I would ask the question, which of those, what segment of those is going to be the big segment, and so where should I be focusing? Because those are the companies who ultimately will be big successes. By and large, the world does not need another search engine, although there probably will be something that comes along eventually. The world does not need another e-commerce company. Maybe there'll be something that comes along. So there may be those sort of opportunities, but it's really, there are opportunities that are going to come along that are orthogonal to what exists today, which wind up displacing a lot of existing industries. So, 15 years from now, will eBay be around? Will Facebook be around? Will Google be around? I don't know. But there's certainly a lot of new technology that has the potential to change their markets and marketplaces, even those companies today are currently market leaders. No questions? Please.
My name is Rasul. And you have mentioned about the Yelp. I would like to know in details what you have told that they have, as the first business model, they tried to rank the personalities, and they have failed with that.
Yes.
And their model have been applied to the official market, but organizations. They have applied rank the organization to
Right.
the markets. Why did they fail with ranking of personality?
So it wasn't, it's a good question. Why did Yelp fail the first time around? So Yelp, if I went, I'm not single, I'm married happily, but when I was single, I would go out and meet women and I'd go on a date. And for some reason, Yelp thought it was a good idea that somebody could build a website and I could rate that person. I don't know, personality, attractiveness. I have no idea what the criteria would be. I don't want to think about some of the criteria, frankly, at least in a public forum. And it failed. Nobody was interested in using it. Makes perfect sense to me. If I go out on a date, I don't want somebody rating and ranking me, and I'm probably not comfortable rating and ranking somebody else, because they may come back and say, "You jerk," it didn't work. But what they discovered was that when people go to restaurants, which was their first market, was people want to know, is this restaurant any good? What should I order? And guess what? There are more people who go to restaurants on a regular basis than date, because you can be single or married and still go to a restaurant, right? And some people go to restaurants both for lunchtime and dinner time. So it appeared to be a better market for them, and it was less likely to cause tension if I said the steak is good, but don't eat the chicken, rather than my saying this girl is ugly, or she has no personality, or it's a more comfortable tool for people to use, and I think that's why it took off. So just because you have a product doesn't necessarily mean you've addressed the right market. And I think that's always the question, which is why we always encourage companies, particularly international companies, start your business in your home country, get some initial market traction, make sure your product works. But if you're coming to the U.S. market, think of it as entirely different. You may be pleasantly surprised when it's identical, but it rarely is. People call it different things. People talk about the problem and the solution using different words, and you need to understand those things. And so thinking about where you best apply your solution, we had a company in Australia who was, they were going after healthcare providers as one of their target markets. And they were also going after financial institutions and banks and things like that. And they were talking about, well, maybe we'll go after healthcare industry here in the U.S. He said, you know what? The healthcare industry is going through a lot of change and turmoil. You might find a better market going after insurance companies and big banks and other financial institutions. And in fact, that's what they discovered, that the healthcare industry had so many problems right now here in the United States that even though they had the problem, it wasn't their top priority. You need to find customers, you need to find people where your solution is their top priority. And that's the hard part for most startup companies, because they often say to me, well, everybody could be my customer. Well, if everybody could be your customer, then nobody will be. You need to be focused, and you need to be focused on people who say to you, where have you been? I've been looking for your solution for the last 2 years. Those are the people you want. Those are and it's amazing how many times companies come here and they hear that. They come here and they hear those words. And the other words they sometimes hear is, that's really interesting. We'll get back to you. That's a no thank you. That's a go away. It's not important to us. And that's what a lot of startups hear. Startups based here, startups based around the world. More questions? Oh, come on.
One another question about the success. You have still success. About Yelp, I cannot understand how do you measure the success, because as I know, Yelp company, Groupon, and Twitter also are still not profitable.
Right.
Everybody tells that they are successful.
Well, okay. So that's a really good question. We've got a lot of companies here in Silicon Valley that are, quote, successes that don't make money. I'm an old-fashioned kind of guy. I still scratch my head about that. I don't have a good answer for you for that. Even companies like Amazon, are spending huge amounts of money. I think Amazon is making money, but I don't think they're making a lot. They're building their customer base. They're doing a lot of things. I think it's a fair issue. And I can't justify it. I come from the old school which says, yes, you need to be building the value, and that value may not initially be in terms of revenue, but you need to have a long-term model that shows that you're going to be successful, that you're going to be profitable. And I think the jury is still out on some of these companies which are growing, but in some cases they're growing, but the losses are growing instead of the losses getting smaller. So I can't justify that.
John, as a follow-up to this question, do you think the next bubble is growing in the valley?
Is there a bubble?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, so So what happens in Silicon Valley? Look, I've lived here for 28 years. You know, anybody ride roller coasters, right? Goes up, it goes down. I hate roller coaster rides. But guess what? I live here. I learned to accept the fact that it's a roller coaster. And I can tell you, the ride up is better than the ride down. And the problem is, we never know when the ride down starts. We just don't know. And it defies logic. We have companies where valuations are much higher than seems appropriate. We have investors investing huge sums of money in companies and then complaining that the companies are spending money irresponsibly. Why are you giving them that much money? Why, as a board member, are you allowing them to spend that kind of money? These are questions that if you follow me on Twitter, you will see that I have raised and have not gotten any good answers on. So it's the nature of the beast. We will go down at some point. I can't tell you when. It will happen. It may happen because of things here in the valley. It may happen because of something going on someplace else in the world. There is no way to predict when it will happen, but I guarantee you it will happen. There's never been a case in Silicon Valley where things have gone up forever. They just don't. And I can't tell you when or where or how severe the downturn will be. For those of you who took a bus here to get here this morning, you probably saw some of the traffic. The traffic is a barometer of employment here. There's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of employment. There are those of us who, understand that when Silicon Valley is not doing well, employment is down. But we're very happy that there's less traffic when that happens. So, sorry, long answer to a short question.
Great, thank you very much.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you again.
And would you just for any follow-up questions to be emailed to you?
Sure.
Пожалуйста, по имейлу сделать последующие вопросы и just do it.
А где визитная карта? Можно визитку?
Do you have any business cards?
Yeah.
Вы можете сфотографировать